Well, hello again, everybody, and welcome to the Open Mic, where every week I talk with writers from across the spectrum about their work and the process of writing and the publishing industry and all the other good stuff that happens when you write words for a living. I'm really happy today to be joined by Melissa Yuan-Innes, who writes under the name Melissa Yi. She joins us. Are you in Toronto? Or are you in Montreal?
I live between the two, between Montreal and Ottawa, in the middle of nowhere.
Are you in Quebec then?
No, I'm just over the Ontario border.
Oh, okay. I have family, longstanding family from the Quebec area, from La Prairie, dating all the way back to the 1600s, and so I have a sincere fondness for Quebec. So thank you. Welcome. I appreciate you joining me today. I'm amazed at a couple of things, and for those folks who like me are learning here, Melissa is the author of the Hope Sze medical mystery series. She's also an ER doctor. She writes so many things. I'm sitting here in awe of how prolific of a writer you really are. And I love to discover new writers. And so it's been a real treat to discover your writing across the spectrum. So let me just jump right into it. As I said, you're a very prolific writer, but let's talk about your latest book, White Lightning, which is, I believe, the 9th in the Hope Sze mystery series. Tell me a little bit about the series and then this latest edition, where you're at with it.
Okay, so I started writing about hope just as I was finishing up my medical training. So I'm from Ontario, but I did my residency in Quebec. So after you finish your Doctor of Medicine, which is medical school, you get matched anywhere in Canada. It's this really random system and extremely stressful. And I got matched to Montreal for family medicine. And it was a bit of just a drop kick because I didn't know the Quebec medical system really. And I actually didn't do a tour. They offer you if you want to do a tour of the hospitals. And I was like, I'm okay. But it turned out it's super different from Ontario because where I was at Western in London, Ontario, and you would admit a patient, and you at the time you didn't really have to worry about them so much. Whereas in Montreal, you'd admit a patient, they would just sit there, like it was just an administrative thing that they were supposedly admitted to another service, but they're still sitting in the emergency room in front of you. The nurses had just been on strike to try to get better pay. There weren't any phlebotomists to draw the blood, so the nurses had to do that. They would call me to I was like, oh, this patient has chest pain, so we need an electrocardiogram and blood work. And they're like, okay, you do the electrocardiogram. I'm like, oh, I thought you were a nurse. And they're like, yes, we are the nurses, but here the residents have to do it. It was a really hands-on thing. And at night, sometimes the hospitals would say you were the one who has to draw the blood and stuff. So it was just crazy, like the difference in work, and it meant that you couldn't do as many things. As obviously you can't look as many people if you physically have to sit there starting IVs and that sort of thing. And I would see the patients in the hallway and everything, and I just sort of subconsciously started thinking about murder. So I was like, man, what if I was a resident doctor, going from different rotation, from surgery 1 month and palliative care the next month, was killing people, what would happen? So I was like, I'm just gonna write a series about that, about Hope Sze, this resident doctor who, fights disease and death, but also gets these killers. It just seemed like a good idea at the time.
I love that, actually. That's writers get, I think, I've talked with enough writers, and they'll tell you the question they get the most, especially, clearly mystery writers, that they get is, where do you come up with your ideas? And, to the point where it starts to be annoying that they get asked that all the time. Like, well, where does anybody come up with their ideas? Well, I mean, clearly you found great inspiration right there in front of you for all of your ideas. Tell me a little bit about White Lightning. It's a fascinating premise because it deals with bootleggers and Al Capone and ghosts and all kinds of stuff. So you tell the viewers and listeners a little bit about White Lightning.
Okay, a little bit wild. I will do my best to hold up. When you got the strange background, it doesn't work. Okay,
yeah.
You can sort of see my book here. And for each book, I would just kind of dive in. You know how some people plot everything out in advance? So I'm totally not like that. And my colleague and friend, Natalie Gamache, who lives in Vancouver, was like, I could make a custom gin for Hope. Would you like me to make a custom gin for your main character? And I was like, oh, that's an amazing idea. But I was like, you know what? I should probably write about alcohol if I'm going to have this custom gin. And I don't really drink. I can, but it's just not a huge draw for me, you know? So I was just like, oh, alcohol. Well, so I started researching alcohol and murder. And if you look that up, well, one of the things that comes up for gin specifically and murder is that gin was a huge kind of plague in England. So at the time, they were at war with France. So brandy was no longer in fashion, was considered unpatriotic, and it was also hard to get because of the war. So they were like, let's start making our own alcohol. And they started making gin, which was extremely strong and extremely cheap. And at the time, it was like the Industrial Revolution. So people had some like more money, but terrible quality of life because they were, you know, in these mills or whatever. And so they would just get drunk whenever they had a chance. And it was apparently still called the mother's ruin because women were getting addicted to alcohol just as much as the men were. And there was one case where a woman ended up killing her son, her 2-year-old, and then selling his clothes for money for gin. And after that, the government said, oh, we need to do something about this. Before that, then they were enjoying the taxes, the money that they were making on it. But after that, they're like, oh no, we can't have people killing their children. So things started to turn. And I was like, wow, that's a crazy story. So I wrote back to Natalie and I'm like, what do you think? Too dark? And she said, never too dark. So I'm like, okay, let me keep going with this. And the other thing that came up, obviously, was prohibition and Al Capone. So I said, okay, you know, that's interesting. Hope tends to be set in Canada because like she just doesn't have time to travel anywhere. Like in residency, you're pretty much stuck in the hospital almost all the time. And when you do have to go somewhere, you just fall asleep because you've been working so hard. And I was like, okay, let me see. And it turns out that Canada has a huge connection with prohibition because we used to smuggle all the alcohol into the United States because it really depended on your province and even on your town, how dry you were. In a lot of places, you know, you were allowed to drink at a restaurant or you were allowed to drink in your home, say, but you weren't allowed to buy and sell it. So they would just, you know, they would just ignore that and then they would sell it. And for Windsor and Detroit, it's only a mile or two apart if you go across the river. So people would just set off in their sailboats or in the winter, they could skate across, you know, they could do all sorts of stuff. I was like, wow, this is amazing. And there is a Canadian connection with Al Capone. Like there's a gentleman who wrote about his, I think, great uncle, Frenchie, who ended up going down there and making a lot of money as a driver and stuff for Al Capone. And I was just like, this is cool. I'm going to have to dive right in. And of course, make Hope have to deal with prohibition. And the last thing I would say for it was that I didn't feel like writing anything really bloody during the pandemic. You know, I just thought I'm not going to be doing a lot of gore and a lot of violence. So what would be less violent? Well, what if Hope found a skeleton? So I thought it'd be interesting to deal with bones that, you know, she doesn't have to run a code because the person is long gone, but she would have to decode something historically. And I've never written about history for the series. It's not generally a huge draw for me, but there were so many historical aspects of this. I said, I'm going to have to do some research and put history in this book, which is how the ghosts end up coming in as well.
Well, I love it. And, you know, I love connections to Al Capone. It's strange how over the course of my life, I run into these things all the way. My wife and I were in Kansas City 4 or 5 years ago, and we ended up going to the speakeasy at a hotel that you know, they had this whole shtick where, you know, you can't just, you have to be invited in and someone has to recommend you. And the legend was, or the theory was, that this was Al Capone's headquarters when he was in Kansas City, because he also ran the Kansas City mob. And this was where it was at a hotel. So this is where he stayed. And then there's no electricity in the basement. And, you know, it was just a great bar is really what it was. But you know, I'm fascinated by it. The man has had a huge outsized impact on the whole world in many, many ways during that time. So I love seeing even small connections to Capone in some way. I just think that's a very interesting thing, and you don't see it as much anymore. So I glommed on that right away. Anyway, I recommend it highly. Anyone who hasn't discovered the series, hasn't discovered the book, check it out. It's really good. You're a fabulous writer. In addition to mysteries, you write short stories, young adult, women's fiction, some romance, nonfiction, medical memoir, self-help, and even investing, which I want to talk to you definitely about that.
Oh, awesome.
Probably leaving something out here too. You might be the highest achiever I have ever met in my life.
Maybe just ADHD.
Well, how do you juggle all of these genres? And do you ever see yourself? I mean, I know you've invested a lot of time in the Hope Sze series, but do you ever see yourself really sticking to only one of these genres?
Well, I do have to say for any aspiring writers out there, like not to feel pressure. So for me, I love lots of different things. I'm attracted to reading and writing a lot of different genres. And they really want to pigeonhole you. So they want you to stick to one thing.
Right.
So I felt wonderful when I met Christine Catherine Bosch, and she was just like, oh, I write in all these different things. And I was like, oh, don't you feel like you have to stick to just one? And she's like, no, why would I feel like that? After I write my Smoky Dalton mysteries, I really need my sweet romances. So for her, it was a way of balancing out. And I was like, oh, thank God I found somebody else who feels like me. On the other hand, then I ended up, starting my medical career independently and having children, and we have dogs now and everything. Like, it's just like time is a factor. So it's kind of cool. I wrote more variety at the beginning, and I have concentrated more on Hope Sze recently because just for time and energy. But I encourage both. Like, if you want to build a career, it does make sense to stick with one genre. But if you really love lots of different things, I encourage you to explore it because you never know what people will enjoy reading and what you will feel most passionate about.
I really relate to that. When I started out as a reporter, I thought my goal forever was going to be I was going to be a sports writer, right? And I did it for a couple of years. And then one thing I thought I would never do in my life is cover politics. And I thought, polar opposites. And after a couple of years of writing about sports, I realized I really don't like this. I don't like the environment. I was really surprised. And then circumstances led me to covering politics, and I've been doing it for the last 25 years. And I never thought in a million years that would be the case, but it's worked out much better. And had the chance to write. I've covered business. I've covered cases at the U.S. Supreme Court. I've covered Congress. Yeah, I completely understand and relate to the idea of not just doing one thing. And I appreciate that you noted that the industry doesn't let you do that often. If you've had success in an area, they often want you to keep doing that and only that because that makes you easier to market.
Correct.
Have you struggled with that at all? Have you found, I know you noted it, but I mean, have you ever seen your marketing support suffer or anything because you're not singularly focused on one genre?
It's hard to say. So I'm with an authors collective called Wintry Press. So they don't muzzle their authors at all. You will find with a lot of traditional publishing that they do, like for example, for speed, like that you should only write one book a year and that's maximal. God forbid you want to write two, then you better write it under a different name because they can't afford to market more than one a year. But the great thing now is that you have a range of choice. You can do traditional big publishing, you can do small publishing, you can do micro publishing, you can do indie publishing, you can do whatever you want. And it's not as much siloed as it used to be. So like authors are more in charge of their own careers than they've ever been.
Well, that's a positive thing. And so we've noted, of course, that you are an ER doctor. I noted all the things that you write in. You're a wife, mother, dog parent. Just the dog parenting part alone, I know. My daughter's 35. I don't have to worry about that anymore. But the dog stuff, I completely understand. Balance is always a really hard thing for writers. I know myself, there's times I just get overwhelmed. I always keep a lot of plates spinning. I'm a little ADHD myself. And it's, I really wouldn't want to have it any other way, but it can sometimes be overwhelming. How do you find the balance? I know for me, it's always a struggle trying to find the right balance and understand when I'm the most creative or when I'm the most task oriented and honoring those things and not trying to shoehorn one into the other, right? I don't write creatively well in the mornings. No matter how much I've tried, it's all junk. I write much more creatively in the evenings. Task stuff and my work, much better in the mornings. I don't explain it, but I'm done fighting with it. How about you? How did you find the balance, or how do you find the balance with your schedule and all the other things and the different genres? Is there a pattern that you follow, or what is it that works for you?
Well, first, I just want to say that listening to yourself and your body and your needs is so key. And I have to say, I'm not good at it. So I remember speaking to a bunch of people who were interested in medicine and writing. And they were like, well, do you sleep? And I was like, sort of, like I just didn't really worry about it, but there was one point where I hit a wall and stuff, and I was like, you know what? Sleep is super important. So now I just try to tell people you have to sleep. Like it's not just sort of this optional thing that you kind of do when you feel like it, but otherwise don't worry about it. You can keep your pedal to the metal for a long time, but at some point you will crack, and it's not pretty. So why don't you just prevent that by actually taking care of yourself? And it is hard because just as a marketing thing, people are pretty good about like, if you share like, oh, I did this, I did that, they're like, oh, hooray, like another one. Some of them will get bored and just be like, oh, for heaven's sake, like she's just going off again, but a lot of your friends will cheer you on. But if you're just like, oh, I'm doing self-care, like people don't really, they don't know what to do with it. So you have to listen to yourself and not really worry so much about it. Like, like I just had been kind of on a social media break, just be like, well, I'm not doing it right now. And, I could see that even if people weren't like, I don't see the politics and stuff so much because that's not who I'm friends with or who I follow. But even just they would say something happened. Like, for example, one of my friends had a personal tragedy recently. And then I'm worried about it. Like, I'm like, oh, how can I help? What can I do? Like, you just, you like the world is too much with us,
Yeah.
So that's the first thing, you need to give yourself some distance. So then what works for me in terms of schedule and stuff is, well, so on the financial thing, I'm a big proponent of financial independence, retiring early. So that is what we do so that I could pull back from work. Because the worst thing is just, especially with the pandemic, like just, it's just constant, like work, 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 work. And it's getting worse and worse. Like people are more rude and there are more and more problems and there aren't any beds and et cetera. So it's just very stressful. So if you can pull back from that and just be like, I can help when I want to, but I don't have to be there all the time because I'm so much in debt. That's such a blessing. And then, so then if I can write in the morning or before, so like first thing in the morning, or I know that I have a shift or something coming up. So I'm like, oh, I'm going to write 1,000 words in advance so that if I can't write that day, I don't write that day. I come home and I'm a vegetable, like who cares? Because my rule of thumb was I try to write 1,000 words a day if I don't have a shift and 500 words a day if I do. And I used to be like really strict. And at one point I brought it up to 2,000 words a day and all this stuff. But then you don't have time to like send out a short story or just, to have a life. I would just be doing that one thing. I'd be so exhausted. I wouldn't be able to do other stuff. So I just be like, you know what, 1,000 words a day to other people, that's like, a really sad level. For me, I'm like, I'm okay with it. If I exceed it, great. And if I don't exceed it, then that's life. And I used to always make myself make it up. Like once my laptop was stolen and stuff, and I was like, oh, I just finished my 2,000 words, and then I ended up like making up the words afterwards. And I don't make myself do that anymore. You just have to have fun. You have to enjoy a bit, not treat it always like a job, which again is a luxury.
Well, and I'm glad you brought that up because I mean I've had that same thought at times that I remember years ago I was doing a lot of freelance work and I realized and I was I was having a lot of success at it and look, I have an ego like anybody else, so when you're doing really well and you're being sought out and the money's good and all the things that spell success in our society, I looked up one day and realized, well, one of the reasons I've always loved this job is that I have a lot of freedom. But right now I'm working 7 days a week because I've got so much on my plate that I'm not having any fun at all. I'm not enjoying these stories. I enjoy talking to people. I enjoy doing these stories. And I got to the point where I didn't enjoy it anymore. So cutting back was, even though of course, you make less money, but it was really addition by subtraction. I completely understand what you're saying there completely. You mentioned early retirement, and I mentioned before that you write investing books, and I'm fascinated by that idea because that's like the 180 from mysteries and YA and everything else. As you know, you're an advocate for retirement early, and clearly you know what you're doing. So tell me a little bit about that and whether or not we might see you do more books in that area.
Okay, so I should say I've just written articles on it, and I have done webinars because I'm not a financial advisor. I haven't gotten the licensing, that sort of thing. But it's a big interest of mine because it's freedom. So, if you think about what society wants you to make widgets for it. Like it doesn't really care about you as a person. You're just a widget maker. So Um, when things weren't going well at work, like at my work, I was like, you know what? I don't see myself being able to do this forever. And like just I'll just say because of politics. So I need a way out. And I looked at a few different ways, but I'm like, you know what I need to do? I need to pay attention to my investments. And my father was very into investing, and then I just let him do his thing. Unfortunately, he ended up passing away, and I just kind of left it for a while. But then afterwards, I was like, you know what? I need to seize control of this, and I need to do research. And again, there's never been a better time when more people have taken the reins and have made it really user friendly because there are so many blogs on it. And it's a really simple concept, which is just like instead of sitting there and picking stocks, what you need to do is just buy an exchange trade fund, which is an ETF, which just is like buying a grocery basket of all the things. So if you know, if you want to buy all the Canadian stocks or all the American stocks or even all the stocks in the world, you can do that with one fund, you know, and you can even buy ones that have a certain percentage of stocks versus bonds. You know, just be like, I feel like I need more bonds, you know, okay, you know, buy this one. So, and actually, the US was really a pioneer in this way, but Canada has slowly followed suit. And so I just mainly try to tell people it's not hard, it's really easy. All you have to do, like, it's really a lot more mental to be able to pull the trigger, walk away from your financial advisor, and do it yourself. But in the end, it's really worth it. And of course, the market's been on a tear for the last 10 years.
Right.
So a lot of the people who are in it are really cowboys and they're just like, I'm 100% stocks. I can do crypto. Like you need to kind of filter out that noise and just be like, what makes the most sense statistically for you? You know, how soon do you need the money? Do you have a 35-year-old daughter who might need you in the future? You know, you wouldn't just be gambling the way that some people are because, you know, they're 20 years old and they don't care if they have to live on ramen for the next 10 years if there's a downturn. So you do have to keep in mind that the market goes up and down. Like there's no guarantee now, and we've been expecting a downturn for a while. Nothing's really stuck for a while. But so then you get a lot of people who are just like, I can do this. But it's the people who are able to stick it out long term, even if the market drops, to just be like, you know what, it's still okay. Market's on sale. Let's go.
Right. And well, you and my wife would have a lot to talk about. She's a fabulous, you know, I trust her implicitly because she understands these things much better than I do, and thank God. I will
actually, you know what? My husband has zero interest in it, just by the way. So I do our finances too.
Yeah, well, the trade-off is I cook, right? And she's a danger to herself and others in the kitchen. So, you know, we have a pretty fair trade. You'll make sure I get to retire and I'll make sure she stays healthy. It works out great.
Perfect.
I was going to ask you this question later, but I'm going to ask it now because you mentioned something that I think right now is these two things I think are intrinsically linked, even though they probably don't seem like it. This last couple of years, of course, we've been in the pandemic. I did a whole series at the beginning of this on the pandemic on how writers and creatives were handling the pandemic. But I think this question has more to do with medical personnel like yourself. I mean, we've all seen the unfathomable stress that medical people have been put under during this time. Of course, politics has been a huge part of it. Ignorance, a lot of things that I'll just leave that there. I'm curious, how has all of that affected you as a writer? Now, you noted you didn't want to write something too gory in the latest Hope Sze story because, you know, when you're surrounded by a lot of bad stuff, I can understand that, completely understand that. How else has it affected you as a writer? And is it something that's pushing you more toward, you know, becoming a full-time writer and not doing medicine anymore?
Yeah, good points, all of them. Yeah. So the very beginning of the pandemic, like I just put my head down and tried to understand, you know, what it meant clinically and what we understood about how it was transmitted. I actually wrote or co-wrote really petition to try and get PPE and to try and mobilize funds and that sort of thing on change.org, and it was extremely popular. You know, I think we hit over 200,000 signatures, and it was also in a way kind of humbling to think like, more people may read this who then ever read my fiction or nonfiction, you know. But it felt good to be able to use my words to help. And then actually then media came as well. So I was able to appear nationally and that sort of thing just based on that. So it made me think about the value of communication and how being able to express yourself well. Because other people wrote petitions at the same time, but you know, if they were extremely long or very complex and stuff, people wouldn't understand them. So it is an advantage to be a writer. I had already pulled back from medicine, so it wasn't, but otherwise I know so many people who have pulled back from medicine and from nursing. We're running out of nurses. It's just, and it's also how we're treated by patients, to be honest. I feel like I have been sheltered by it so much because I ended up just working at one tiny hospital where people are still really nice and where there was not a lot of travel. So we didn't get hit by COVID the way that so many other places did again and again and again. Like, you know, I knew somebody who worked in Toronto and he was just like, you know, we can't even finish one wave before the next wave is on. And so you never get a rest. So I do feel fortunate, but, you know, Omicron hit us. And then, you know, so then patients were sick. We had fewer staff to look after them. We didn't have the ventilation that we needed, you know, like, because up until then we had been transferring our COVID patients to other institutions. So just everything is very stressful. I did think for myself, so I just lost a month of writing at the beginning when I was trying to do a lot of research and stuff. I just didn't write, period. And then after that, I was sort of, it plays with your head. It was so funny because, you know, I was talking to other people and I was like, you know, it's hard to write during the pandemic. And they were like, really? Like they had no clue, like they were non-writers, you know, but they're just like, but why? You know, I'm just like, because.
Don't you have all this time?
I just thought it was so strange. I'm just like, because people are dying and losing their jobs and, you know, sheltering at home and, you know, all this super stressful stuff. So for me, you know, with White Lightning, it is a party, you know, like she's at a Prohibition era hotel. The people are coming, like there's no COVID. People like there's a convention of people who are dressed up as fictional villains. Like it's really a good time. Like and she's drinking, which she never does. And you know, so I did that on purpose. You know, I just wanted to live in a world where you didn't have to worry about infectious diseases being spread through aerosols, and we could just escape, which I love. You know, so even if there's murder, you can still have fun. And one of my friends told me that she really appreciated that.
You know, I think it's one of the things I'm really liking about it too, and I can really relate to it. You know, I'm in the rewrite revisions. That's the word I'm trying to think of. I'm in the revisions portion of the novel I'm working on, and it's taken a lot longer. And a big part of it was because I had the same thought. You know, it's crime fiction, and I went back and changed a lot of things because I said I don't want to have a bunch of gore here. I want there to be more humor. I want there to be, so I had to really revise my thinking and change some of my characters and not have anything be graphic. I took anything that had any of that out. I took it out, and I like it a lot better. And I'm noticing it too in what I read, that I'm just, and what I ingest on television or what I watch on YouTube when I'm working out on our treadmill. I don't want to take any more of this in. I'm a person who is in the news, or, you know, news is my world, but I avoid the news every chance I can. As soon as I'm done with it, I'm done with it. I don't want to take in anymore because it affects me. I've realized how much it affects me, and it makes me less creative. And so that's why I asked that question. I mean, you're much more front lines than I am, of course, but by orders of magnitude. So I really wondered how it affected your creativity. And it sounds to me like it, you know, it gave you a different kind of creativity, or it steered your creativity in a different direction, which I find to be very interesting. Because creativity will not be denied. It's kind of like running water. It's just where's it going to flow to?
Yeah, I just want people to know that like many others, have felt this dip. But then, yeah, you get kind of rechanneled. You know, it's fine if you need to take more time. It's fine if you need to rest and if you need to read or, you know, have fun with other stuff or work out. You know, just it's all good. You just have to have a lot of compassion for yourself.
Right.
Now.
Well, so I also wanted to ask you about your sense of humor because you have a great sense of humor. It certainly comes across in your writing, and I'm I'm curious about you have another series of books you wrote called "The Most Unfeeling Doctor in the World," which is a nonfiction, of course, your medical memoir. I can only imagine the stories that every doctor must be able to tell. But tell us a little bit more about those and about how what you think about humor in writing and how you use humor in your writing.
Yeah, I think for me, like, so first of all, I do love to laugh, and thank you so much for the compliment. I really appreciate it. Um, I think that if you just like always have one note, like if it's always something dark, always something horrifying, it's a lot for somebody to take in. It's almost like pushing somebody's face into water and holding them down. So that if you have some humor, like you're going to just take a breath and stuff, even if you want to put them down again, they can still breathe. And I really feel that. And I know that like one reaction to Stockholm syndrome, just for example, like the fourth book where Hope is taken hostage, one person was like, but why is she still making jokes all the time? I'm like, it's just what we do. And a lot of people don't understand why there's a lot of Black humor um, on the job in emergency medicine and other fields. And it's just because it just detracts attention because you're not allowed to explode, you're not allowed to be rude, you're not allowed to yell anymore. But if you just sort of make a wisecrack under your breath, you get a free pass sometimes. And certainly if you do it in your fiction. So the most unfeeling doctor in the world was born, like I write essays for the Medical Post, and one of the people thought I was the most unfeeling doctor they'd ever met. And I was pretty shocked because all I was trying to do was take a history when they took offense. And I was like even more angry because at the time I was researching Buddhism, and I was like, in Buddhism, if people make you angry, they're your teacher. So I was driving home and I was like, this person's supposed to be my teacher. Like it was just adding insult to injury. Um, but since then, I've sort of come to terms with it and being like, you know what? Yeah, when people come to merge, they're just very stressed out and they don't understand that why you're asking them the same question that they had answered yesterday when they came. They don't understand why you don't have immediate access to those records and that sort of thing. And it's okay. Like I probably would flow more with the punches, but at the time it was just like another slap in the face. So I do enjoy writing articles. That is one of the ways that I decompress actually is by writing articles for the Medical Post and just reflecting on this crazy life. It's the privilege to be able to look into people's lives at times of crisis, but it's also, obviously you can see the worst of humanity too. So it's a balance.
Yeah, my brother was a cop. I can relate, and I had a sister-in-law who was a neonatal ICU nurse, and some of the things that would come out of her mouth would just be shocking. But that's how you cope with little, because unfortunately a lot of preemies didn't make it and that kind of thing, and so it's that or lose your marbles, right? So I get it. Let me. We're getting close on time, but this is a question I really, really want to ask you. Because we know the publishing industry has not always been terribly welcoming to people of color. And certainly, though we're paying a lot more attention to diversity now than we have in years past. But I'm curious, so paying attention to it doesn't necessarily mean that it's changing. So I'm curious what you think of where the industry is now for writers of color, for Asian Americans. Certainly, we know here in America, it's been a really tough time for Asian Americans. How has it been, from your perspective, maybe longer than just the pandemic, but for Asian authors and with Asian characters? Are you seeing what you would consider to be something like progress in how they are received and opportunity?
I'm not sure. Like certainly what has changed is that on guidelines, they will say that they're looking for diversity and that they're more open to it. Of course, when they do surveys, like I think was it Publishers Weekly did a survey and showed that 90% of the traditional publishing industry is white. So while they say they want it, like that hasn't made any noticeable change to hiring practices or anything like that. And I don't know. Like, I think for readers, there's a lot of hunger to see more diversity. Like, I remember when I was a kid reading, I basically couldn't find books with people of color unless it was some very sad story, that might involve abuse. And that's really, you still see that, but at least things are changing in that way. Like, I used to read things about people who were overweight because I just felt like, oh, somebody who's at least breaks the mold that way. I just would try to identify with them. For Asian characters, I don't know. I don't see it. I've been to panels at cons and stuff where they talk about diversity. And for example, one person's solution was, my background is this kind of waspy background. I don't want to identify them. So I only write about from that perspective. And I do have people with other characters and other backgrounds, but I never write from their perspective. So I'm not taking over their stories. And I put up my hand because I wanted to say, like, if you have different skin colors, but they never get to speak about their history or their culture, then it's just window dressing. It's not actually, you're not actually getting to say it. But they didn't call on me. I didn't get to speak. So I think with a lot of things, I think most readers want to see change. A lot of publishing people, are cool, and they also want to change. When that happens or how materially that happens, I don't know. But at least we're kind of pointed in the right direction, and we'll see what happens. But if you're into it, like, make sure that you buy the books and that you check out the interviews and whatever else you need to do, because that's the only way that those voices will be heard.
Right. Yeah, I agree. It's something like my last memory, I was at a conference, I won't say which one, but they had a diversity panel, and every single person on the panel was a middle-aged white person.
Yeah.
Oh man, really? You're trying to tell me
the progress is that they're talking about it, like,
yeah,
which is not very much progress. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I like to end on what I hope's a fun note, what I mean to be a fun question here. And it's a variation of the same question I ask everybody that comes on the show. So let's just say I have the power to put you together for a conversation, drink, dinner, whatever would make you happy, with any one of the following three people. Who would you choose? And the three people that I will offer you are New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, the astronaut Kalpana Chawla, or Elizabeth Kubler-Ross. One of those three people I could put you together with. Who would you choose to have a conversation with, and why?
Okay, absolutely no question. Sorry, it's Jacinda Ardern. Love her. She's the only one who has had really consistent and effective COVID policies. She has an equal relationship with her husband. She was able to show how to make it work as a mom, as a new mother and a new leader. She also showed judgment when they had their shooting, when she chose not to name the perpetrator because she didn't want to bring him any more publicity, and she wanted to concentrate on the people who had been lost. I just love her. So for the astronaut, that would be my husband's choice because he loves space. I'm afraid I don't love space enough, but otherwise I'm sure she's a really cool person. Oh, and Kubler-Ross, I think I would just read her books. So I wouldn't need to have dinner with her. So it was an easy choice for me.
Easy choice. Well, good. I sometimes I like it when it's a tougher choice, but your reasoning is perfectly logical. I completely understand. Well, I don't want to keep you any longer. I greatly appreciate you coming on the show and sharing your time with me today, and with the listeners and readers, not readers, viewers. Sometimes I get myself tied in knots here.
Hopefully some of them are readers.
Yeah, hopefully, please. Yeah, so speaking of readers, if you haven't discovered Melissa's books, Melissa Yuan-Innes, writing under the name Melissa Yi, the Hope Sze series, it's great. She's got a lot of other stuff. Go check out her website. It's fabulous. She's got a lot of options there. You're clearly a really fun, interesting, funny person to talk to. Very well thought out too. So I really appreciate that. So that's the whole point of this show, folks. Hopefully you get to meet new writers and discover new stories to read. I highly recommend it. So until next time, again, if you haven't hit the subscribe button somewhere, please do that, because it just, then you don't miss anything. We've had some really good folks on the show, and I've got a whole bunch more lined up in the coming weeks. So hit subscribe so you don't miss anything. And until then, again, Melissa, thank you very much. We will see you next time. I'm Rich Ehisen, and this has been the Open Mic, Writers in Their Own Words. Stay safe and be smart. Take care.